G'day, 5U360 fans. It's your old mate Big J here from Australia. And again today we're speaking to main event commentator and the voice of Australian boxing, Ben Damon. G'day Ben, thanks for joining us again here today, mate.
G'day Jason, yeah, good to be talking to you, mate. Plenty's gone on since last we spoke, that's for sure. Some exciting fights coming up for some Aussies and, of course, the arrival of Tszyu against Jeff Horn.
Absolutely. So just, in a retrospect, looking back at the fight, it was the shock of the year without being the shock of the year because he was, the betting market had that he was the heavy favourite, that he was going to go in there and pretty much, destroy Jeff Horn. And funnily enough, that's exactly what happened. So they were completely accurate. But I thought that Jeff would be too much for Tim, so did a lot of people, and he surprised a whole lot of us.
Oh, yeah. I think everyone expected Jeff Horn to be right in the fight. I think we expected to see Tszyu really tested. But as it turned out, we just saw an absolute masterclass from Tszyu. Perhaps Jeff Horn wasn't the Jeff Horn of old, but maybe it wouldn't have mattered because Tszyu was just outstanding. He's matured incredibly quickly for a 25-year-old. Having his 16th professional fight, and he completely dismantled a world-class opponent in Jeff Horn. He's so mature and so measured in what he does in the ring, and really, Horn just had no answers, and he admits he was pretty much out of steam in round two, and from there it was just one-way traffic. So an incredible performance from Tszyu, who, yeah, you're right, he absolutely justified those betting markets.
Yeah, he absolutely did, and all hope that everyone's going to jump behind Tszyu now. And the reports that I'm getting that the bandwagon jumpers in America have jumped all over Tszyu, saying that he's going to be a great thing and he could beat Charlo and all those sort of things. I'm like, yeah, we'll see how he goes. So, but
yeah, I know he got a lot of attention overseas, that's for sure. I think that's probably one of the only benefits of this global pandemic we're in at the moment is people are really searching for their boxing content, so they certainly would have tuned in to watch Tszyu, a famous surname, against Jeff Horn, someone they know very, very well in the US via ESPN+. So, that was for Tim to get that sort of level of exposure. Also, it was seen right through the UK, and I know there's a lot of interest in Tim's name through there and in Russia, of course, as well, where his dad now resides. So it was a breakout moment for him, not just in terms of becoming a mainstream star in Australia, which he's most certainly done now, but also globally as a boxing force. And there were comments from some, including Paulie Malignaggi, who said that Tszyu will go on to be our greatest ever boxer. That's a lot of pressure on him, no doubt at all. But it's good to see that those people liked what they saw in a young Tszyu.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So I want to bring up your podcast. Now it's called Standing 8. That's correct. It's called Standing 8 with yourself, Jeff Fenech, and Ben Simmons.
That's right. Yeah, I do a podcast with Jeff Fenech, and it is called Standing 8. Most recently we did have Glenn Rushton on after the fight, and Jeff has obviously Jeff Fenech, that is, has obviously been a staunch critic of Glenn Rushton for quite some time, particularly since that fight in Bendigo where Glenn appeared not to try and stop the fight. So, it was interesting to sort of let those two go toe-to-toe over what we'd just seen in Townsville and the history of their relationship and Glenn's time in boxing.
What did you take away from that podcast? Because I've seen it about 2 times now, and I'm like, it seems that from what I took away from it is that there seems to be this committee that Glenn seems to answer to. And what I took away from it was like, they don't really know to seem like who's in charge of what's going on at Team Horn at the moment. There's this committee that he keeps on, that he brought up.
And he was at pains to say that, wasn't he, on the podcast, that rather than the previous situation where he was sort of the boss of the team and dictated how the camp went and how preparation went, now there's a few more voices. He was very critical, of course, of Chris Muckett, who's the strength and conditioning trainer. He wasn't at all impressed by his performance, nor those who were in the corner with him, nor Jeff and his commitment to training. So, it was interesting that Glenn did not take any responsibility himself. He was pretty keen to share that around with a group of others, and clearly was disappointed and upset with the way that Jeff himself committed to to the preparation. So, yeah, it was an interesting chat. Glenn's not everyone's cup of tea, and maybe if there was a little bit more humility in what he expressed, then people would have found it a bit more palatable. But yeah, he certainly threw a full of the bus, you could say, in the course of that conversation. He's a very confident man. He's obviously had a huge amount of success with Jeff Horn, most notably beating Manny Pacquiao, and I guess that is reflected in the way that he analyses losses as well as wins. So you can be as critical as you like in terms of his reluctance to throw in the towel. He admitted on the podcast that he was going to send Jeff Horn out for round 9 in that fight. But yeah, he stands by each and every one of his actions through the course of Jeff Horn's professional boxing career.
Yeah, well, you can't blame a man by standing by his convictions. That's certainly you can't blame a man for that. And
he certainly does that. No doubt at all.
That's right. He'll defend himself, amicably, and he'll defend himself against any critic. And you've got to admire that in a man. So he's not going to change his mind just because someone says that they have a difference of opinion, which you can respect that.
Yeah. Yep. No, 100%. No, I fully appreciate that. I think it was a good, constructive conversation. He did take a fair bit of criticism, and he answered all the questions we threw at him. There were bits and pieces you'd prefer him to express differently. Maybe it would be good if he was able to acknowledge his role and what appears to be a collapse in the relationship between himself and his fighter ultimately. But he's pretty comfortable with everything that's gone on, and he defends it very, very strongly.
I don't mind speaking to Glenn Rushton. He's always good to talk to. So it's just his mannerisms. I said to you before, he reminds me of an old major I used to serve under, and just the way he talks, you just want to lift your game every time you talk to him. So
and certainly he's had that effect on his fighters. We saw a superhuman performance, really, from a young Jeff Horn against Manny Pacquiao, and he was in the corner there motivating him, and he's been there throughout that career and has had other levels of success with other fighters as well. So, he certainly plays a motivational role, and he does have loyalty from his fighters. A few were surprised that Jeff didn't walk away from Glenn Rushton after what happened in Bendigo, but I don't know that he even really considered it. So loyal is he to Glenn Rushton. Now, of course, we wait and see what happens in the professional career of Jeff Horn, whether that is it at its end, and you would think that probably that is the case. And if you were to continue or to come back at some point, would Glenn Rushton be there? Well, you'd think he probably will if that were to happen. But for now, I think Jeff's earned that time away, which he will take. I don't know that we'll definitely see an announcement of any sort in coming weeks. We may do, but otherwise I'd expect that Jeff will just sort of disappear for a little while and weigh it all up. And if there's something attractive that pops up in a year or two, then maybe he does come back to the ring. But otherwise, he's done more than enough, and we're all very grateful in Australian boxing for what he's done for the sport here, because without that victory against Manny Pacquiao, the sport would simply not be in such a strong position as it is now.
Absolutely, and I'm in no position to advise Jeff Horn on what to do, but personally, I think he's done more than enough. He's, he doesn't need to do any more. He's got nothing more to prove. I think he's earned his right to sail away off to the sunset and enjoy his life. I mean, I wouldn't mind being in his position at 32 years old with a few mil in the bank. He's got the ability to never work again if he doesn't want to. He can kick back and relax.
Yeah, that's right. And he's also so popular and so marketable in Queensland still. There'll be plenty of jobs and projects for him to be involved in, whether they be at a governmental level or through the school system. He's a legend in that part of the world, and he'll be looked after, no doubt. And you're right, he's earned a great deal of money. He's got a beautiful house and a beautiful family, so he has done more than enough. If he does choose to walk away, then that is absolutely fine, I think. So we'll just wait and see what he does decide. But you do get the impression probably that Hogan just isn't there for Jeff Horn anymore. He is a comfortable man, and he's not a hungry fighter anymore. He's sort of got to the top of the tree already, and he doesn't feel a need to go back. So it is probably sensible to walk away, but when someone's achieved all that Jeff Horn has, he gets the right to make that decision on his own terms.
Absolutely. And there's plenty of boxers, football players who haven't ended their career on their own terms, and I think that Jeff has definitely had the right to go out the way that he sees fit.
Yes, certainly.
Certainly. So we'll move on. What do you think is going to be next for our next, the new superstar of Australian boxing, Tszyu? Obviously, he wasn't going to get his not at this stage. He's not going to get Patrick Teixeira because he's signed to fight Brian Castino, the Argentinian fighter. That's a cross promotion fight between Golden Boy and PBC. I haven't heard anything when that's actually going to happen, but I know it's a signed, done deal and it's going to happen.
That is the mandatory for Teixeira, who's the Brazilian WBO world champion. There was some discussion from Matt Rose, the promoter of Tszyu, about trying to bring Patrick Teixeira out, and it had some level of support from Golden Boy as well, to allow him to come out and have a voluntary title defence against Tszyu, with the winner to be mandated by the WBO to fight against Brian Castano. But the WBO have ruled against that. They've ruled that the mandatory must take place first, despite the fact that we are in a pandemic, and the Brazilians and the Argentinians are two of the countries that are doing the worst in this pandemic. So it's going to be difficult for them to make that fight happen in the US, but that is the plan before the end of the year for Teixeira and Castano to fight. Tszyu is now ranked at number 2 by the WBO, but it's not going to be that fight next for Tszyu, barring something happening and that fight not being able to take place between Teixeira and Castano, but he's right there to face them, the winner at least next, potentially, or at least very soon. But yeah, it does leave us wondering who Tszyu will fight then, and they're looking at a date possibly in late November or early December for his next outing. And really, you have to look at domestic opponents only, because the situation is that it's just going to be very difficult for and expensive to get anyone out. And Tszyu has made a name for himself and is now someone who can sell pay-per-views off his own name. So maybe the promoter doesn't need to try too hard to get someone out, because Tszyu's going to sell it himself anyway. But even if it was possible, maybe they would have looked at a domestic opponent before they get that world title shot. So the obvious names, Michael Zerafa would be right at the top of the tree there. He's proved that he's world class. He went the distance with Kell Brook. He beat Jeff Horn once and then lost in the rematch in an epic fight in Brisbane. The other names around there, someone like Daniel Lewis. They've got a rivalry out of the amateurs, and certainly there'd be a lot of interest in seeing Daniel Lewis up against Tszyu. He is, of course, coming off a loss in a big fight on the Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder rematch.
Yeah, I remember that one. Yep. Yeah, that was hard to watch. I thought Daniel would have.
It was. Yeah, it was a tricky opponent for him. The massive Sebastian Fundora had a huge height advantage, and Daniel acquitted himself pretty well. But if he'd won that fight, then he would be the obvious one for Tszyu to fight next. But he didn't, obviously. But yeah, I would imagine that Zerafa at the moment would be the favourite. But
Zerafa's got his fight with Choc, so.
Yeah, well, Zerafa is meant to be having a fight with Anthony Mundine, but because of the situation in Victoria, that is looking pretty difficult that they could get that on, because it wasn't a TV fight anyway, so if they're going to have to do it without a crowd, it would be difficult for them to make the money back. So I'd imagine if the offer came from the Zoo camp for Zerafa, then it would probably be accepted. Yeah,
well, as I said, being in Victoria, I know that the lockdown has been extended, and things might not be might not return to normal till November 28th, but things are changing by the day. The figures regional Victoria have virtually no cases, and hopefully the Premier jumps on board and goes, well, let's let these restrictions go. We'll worry about Melbourne and let the rest of Victoria go. So, but, that's a decision that has to be done by them. But yeah, hopefully the sooner they let us out of this lockdown, the better. So.
Yeah, well, regardless, it's going to be pretty difficult for them to put on an event between Anthony Mundine and Michael Zerafa if they don't have television money.
I couldn't agree with you. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that one. Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, not sure what will end up happening there, but I think Michael Zerafa is pretty clearly at the top of the list of options at the moment, but there are others, of course, and Daniel Lewis, I've already mentioned it. Yeah. There's names like Ben Marnie. Not sure if that would be a fight that they'd look to make just yet, but his name is thereabouts. And and others as well.
I'm surprised Dennis Hogan's name hasn't been mentioned, but I saw a video.
Actually, DDP, his promoters are pretty interested in making that fight. Dennis clearly has made a very big name for himself internationally with some great performances. He was ripped off against Jaime Munguia in Mexico.
Yeah, we all know that. Yeah, he was.
Brothers, after going up in weight, but yeah, that'd be a really good fight because he's such a slick boxer. And he's world class quite clearly, Dennis Hogan. So yeah, it's one that would be considered, but the DDP boys have some offers that they're just trying to finalise via the PBC to get Dennis Hogan back over to the US. So his name's certainly in the mix as well.
Yeah, I saw a video on him the other day on YouTube saying that he's looking to fight in November back in the States. So
yes, well, he's right thereabouts for world title eliminators and the like as well. So, and he's highly regarded over there, and will get a good earn as well with whatever fight he does take. So I'd imagine that's the way that they'll go. But if not, yeah, he's right in the conversation for a fight against Tszyu, and it'd be a fascinating fight as well if that could be made, because stylistically we've just seen what Tszyu did to Jeff Horn. Dennis Hogan, he's a different package again, but he has some similar traits to a Jeff Horn, and obviously they've shared a lot of rounds and shared a trainer at one point as well. So yeah, it would be a really interesting fight, that Hogan against Tszyu, if that were able to be made, or Zerafa against Tszyu, a really good fight and an outstanding build-up as well. Michael Zerafa, he's really taken that bad guy approach.
Yeah, he's taken the old heel. He's taken the old heel run.
He really has, yeah, and he's very good at it. And it makes for an entertaining build-up and drives a lot of interest to an event. So it'd be really interesting to see how things went with Tszyu against Zerafa, because there's bad blood there already, and I'm sure that they'd be happy to talk it up.
Oh, for sure. I've spoken to Mick Zerafa, and he's a nice guy, but he does play that heel role very, very well.
Yeah, he really does. He sort of embraced it, didn't he, in those two fights against Jeff Horn? He was pretty upset with a few things that happened, particularly with the rematch clause being enforced and him missing out on the big opportunity in Japan and all the money. But yeah, he had a bone to pick, and he really stepped it up through that preparation. So him playing that role against Tszyu, who's now emerging as a real mainstream star in Australia, would be a fascinating view.
Absolutely. And speaking of Japan, I'm glad you brought that up. The biggest fight in bantamweight for Australians since Lionel Rose is Jason Maloney taking on Inoue Inoue. That's going to be, well, obviously the biggest fight since 1968.
For Jason Maloney, Inoue is a really outstanding fighter and a tough prospect for anyone, but Jason Maloney does not step down from any challenge. We've seen him go into world title fights previously. Emmanuel Rodriguez, he went the distance and lost a split decision, and since then Emmanuel Rodriguez was blasted out of there against Inoue. So yeah, it's a really, really tough fight, but when you're fighting for two world titles and you've been put into this fight by Bob, you sort of have to take them, and it's going to be tough for him. He'll be a big underdog, but he's going to be tough enough, that's for sure, Jason Maloney, and it'd be just an outstanding victory if he could get it, because Inoue is one of the toughest fighters and one of the most sensibly avoided fighters in world boxing just at the moment. You mentioned that Japanese-Australian connection. Yeah, there's a lot of history there, and this one, if Jason could snatch it in an upset, would go right alongside a victory like that of Lionel Rose against Fighting Harada.
Yeah, because I was speaking to Barry Michael the other day, and Barry told me that Lionel was giving no chance against Fighting Harada, and he come up trumped. Same with Jeff when he took on, I can't remember the gentleman's name, when he took on the Japanese fighter for the IBF title, only his 7 pro fight, he wasn't given much of a chance, and both the Aussie boys come up trumps. So we're 2 for 2 against the Japanese in the bantamweight, so history's on our side.
Yeah, well, that's right. It would be another famous victory, wouldn't it? If that could happen, you're right. Yeah, Lionel Rose was a massive outsider against Fighting Harada, but when he returned with the title, the crowds that turned out to greet him were massive, and he became a superstar with that victory in Japan. You mentioned Jeff Fennick, of course. Yeah, he beat Satoshi Shingaki for his IBF bantamweight world title back in 1985, and that was really the start of things for Fennick, who went on to become a mainstream superstar in the years to follow. That victory. So, yeah, there's some history, and, it would be so exciting if Jason could upset Nui and win those world titles, but it is a very, very difficult prospect. He is just something else. He doesn't look like he's going to be nasty, but he really, really is. He punches incredibly hard. He's scored some really heartbreaking victories. He doesn't just beat you. He ruins people's careers with his power and with his dominance.
I've seen highlight reels
going into the fire, he's made of tough stuff. So fingers crossed for him.
Yeah, I've seen the highlight reels of Inoue fight, and I've just gone, he only looks tiny. He's beaten some guys, because Jason is a big bantamweight, and I've seen Inoue just level guys that look twice the size of him. I'm just like, wow. The power of... He doesn't really look like much, but God, he can hit.
No, he doesn't. He looks like he should be in a boy band or something, but he's just...
He looks like you could just shove him over.
Boxer.
Yeah. So, yeah, you look like you could just, like Stiff Breeze would blow him over, and yet he's just blasting these guys. So
I'd imagine that Jason will be watching the fight between Inoue and Nonito Donaire quite a bit, because he did not expose Inoue, but he certainly took him into deeper water than a lot of people expected, and maybe that'll be what Jason tries to do, to try and stand in front of him and go with him and try and do a similar job to what Donaire did. Of course, Inoue won that fight, unanimous decision, and nearly had Donaire out of there at one point. But it was a performance that, at least in watching it, you would go, okay, maybe there is a way to beat this guy, because prior to that, we hadn't really seen any chinks in the armour. He's knocked out 16 of his 19 opponents so far, and he's just looked menacing in doing so as well. It's a really tough fight for Jason Maloney, but if he can try and do what Donaire did and maybe bring some of his own power into things as well, and his outstanding body punching and his resilience, then who knows, maybe he's a chance.
Exactly. And with that fight, that's going to be broadcast in Australia. Is that going to be on Fox Sport, or is it their intention to turn it into a main event?
Just waiting to see how that progresses. There are discussions ongoing at the moment, rather, between main event and Top Rank to figure out whether it is a Fox Sports show, whether it is a pay-per-view. But ideally it will be seen in Australia. There's some outstanding boxing coming up in coming weeks and months, and that would be right at the top of the wish list as well. So, I think we probably will see that on Australian television, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, and then, of course, we've got Jason's twin brother, Andrew. He's got his rematch with Franco. Have you heard any details of when that's actually going to happen? I haven't heard anything. So
I'm hearing that maybe that'll be around the November 13-14 sort of time. So Andrew Maloney was beaten by Joshua Franco, of course, and he gets a rematch now. So it should be 2 weeks to the day after the Jason Maloney-Nui fight, but that is to be confirmed. And again, you'd be hopeful that will end up on Australian television as well. Some speculation that it could be on a card involving Terence Crawford, or maybe it'll be a standalone main event, depending on what happens with the Crawford fight. But that's all being worked out.
I had heard
that. Should
be
announced pretty soon.
Yeah, I had heard that it possibly might be on the undercard to Bud v. Brook. Just on that one, how do you think is Brook going to give, because he hasn't fought 147 in a long time, you think Bud is going to have an early night, or Brook's really going to test Bud?
I think he's tough enough, isn't he, to give him a good test, but Terence Crawford is on another level. He's a freakish boxer, as we saw when Jeff Horn went over there. You want to be right on your game if you're going to be fighting Terence Crawford and Kell Brook. He's been an outstanding fighter, of course, but he didn't help himself, did he, by going up to middleweight and fighting Gennady Golovkin and then going into a fight against Errol Spence Jr. And he took a lot of damage in those fights. We've since seen him win all 3 of his fights since, one of them being against Michael Zerafa, who took him into deep water and had some really good moments as well. But I would think, just where they're at in their careers at the moment, Terence Crawford deserves to be a dominant favourite in that one. You just can't see Kell Brook being able to solve the riddle that is Terence Crawford.
Yeah, not at all. Do you see Crawford ever going for the unification belts? Because I've been waiting for almost 2 years now for him to fight a Spence Jr.
I think he would like to, but the situation as it is with the two sides of the street in American boxing at the moment makes it very difficult. He's obviously aligned with Top Rank, and it's over at the PBC that most of the titles are being held. So there's some outstanding fights to be made there. Terence Crawford against Errol Spence is one of the most enticing bouts that you could even think of in world boxing. But to get those negotiations with all of those big egos and big money players who are involved, Bob Arum and Al Heyman and the like, it's going to be pretty difficult. But hopefully at some point, sooner rather than later, we do get to see a Crawford-Spence fight, because it's one that all of the boxing world would be excited to watch.
Absolutely, absolutely. Excuse me. Thanks for joining us here again, Ben, mate. I mean, Aussie boxing is going to take off again. I mean, hopefully, we've had a bit of a lull in 2020, but if Jason can get over the line on Halloween against the Monster, ironically enough, it's on Halloween. I got a bit of a chuckle out of that. Does Jason have an alias? I know his brother's called the Monster as well, ironically enough. Does Jason have one?
I think he had a new one last time out, Jason. Didn't he call himself Mayhem when he fought?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think he did.
He's been through a few now, but Mayhem suits him. So it's the Monster and Mayhem in that big fight coming up between those two. And hopefully we will see that on Australian television. It'd be a really good one to get on here, and he deserves all the support. Both of those brothers do. They're an outstanding family, and they're great representatives for Australian boxing, and they've done such great things on the world stage. So hopefully that one ends up. But we do know that on Sunday week, so Sunday the 27th of September, it's a full day of boxing on Fox Sports, starting in the morning with the World Boxing Super Series final. It's cruiserweight between Bradis and Dorticos, live from Germany. That'll be on from about 5:30 in the morning on Fox Sports 507. This is Sunday the 27th of September. And following that, there's the Charlo doubleheader. So you've got Charlo Derevianchenko and Charlo Rosario in their doubleheader event via the PBC in Connecticut. That'll be on from 9 a.m. until about 3 p.m. in the afternoon, given that it is a doubleheader. So there's essentially live boxing from 5:30 in the morning till 3 o'clock on the 27th of September on Fox Sports 507.
Yeah, it's going to be a big binge session, and we're going to love every second of it, because it could be a potential future opponent for our own Tszyu at 154. So
yeah, there could very well be. Yeah, Charlo Rosario fighting for a couple of the belts, and Tim's right in the mix. So exciting for all of the boxing public, but also to see maybe a future opponent for our own emerging star.
Exactly. Well, thanks for joining us again at 5View 360, mate. We appreciate your time here. Thank you very much, Ben. We really appreciate your time here, mate.
Yeah, no problems at all. Anytime, Jason. Cheers, mate.
Thank you. That was Ben Damon from Foxtel Main Event, and this has been your old mate Big J for 5View 360 Australia. Please like and subscribe.